Welcome to the North Carolina Council for Social Studies Connections, a collective podcast for NC social studies teachers. Each episode features insightful interviews with experienced educators, curriculum specialists, and thought leaders who have dedicated their careers to enriching social studies education. Together, we'll explore best practices and tips for addressing the unique challenges that come with teaching the ever-evolving subject of social studies.
I'm thrilled to have you join us today as we explore the fascinating world of social studies education throughout North Carolina. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Towne. I am a social studies teacher over at the Early College, and I am sitting here today talking with Miss Candi Tucker. She is a social studies civics teacher and all-around social studies teacher at, is it Washington High School?
Washington High.
Washington High School.
The PAMPAC.
Okay, so we are talking a little bit about a kind of a neat thing that you and I have spent some time talking about, which is a Civic Roundtable that you bring your kids to. And so if any other social studies teachers out there that is interested in doing that, can you tell us how you got that started? What was kind of your focus on that? What was the bright idea that came with that? And where would somebody start?
Okay. Thank you for bringing me out here today so that we can chat about a few things. It started that when I got to Washington High School, I started inviting elected officials to my classroom. I was new to Washington High, didn't know a lot of people, but it was just by chance I got to know some members of the Board of Education. So I invited them to come to my classroom.
Okay.
But that's only 25 students and a few board members in one classroom. The next year I had 2 civics classes. So how are we going to do that? And I had at the time, Congressman Walter B. Jones Jr. came, and so we had to move to the Performing Arts Center. But again, that's just bringing one person to speak into one building. So then this is really, when you said what sparked the idea, my birthday.
Really?
I didn't want to teach on my birthday. So I planned a field trip.
There's no judgment on that. There's no judgment.
I planned a field trip for my students on my birthday, and it was beyond easy. I called the Board of Elections. I did not know the director of the Board of Elections. I'd worked with her just a little bit in borrowing materials. We borrowed a ballot machine for something that we were doing. But I didn't have a relationship with her at the time. But I called the director of the Board of Elections in Beaufort County, and I told her what I wanted to do was that to have several elected officials in a larger room in a roundtable atmosphere so that my students could just talk to them. And I'm going to give her kudos on all that because she basically put it together for me. It was my idea, and then I just called the director. I did give her some guidelines. I said, I want to make sure that they are I wanted Board of Education, I wanted county commissioners, and someone from the city. So Washington's a fairly small little town. Most everybody knows everybody, and she just called them. What I ended up getting was Board of Education, county commissioners, the mayor, and our state representative to all come in. And so she just set it up in a room there at the Board of Elections. Each of the elected officials kind of gave a biographical sketch, talked about how long they had been in office and what they wanted to do. And then they opened it to questions for my students. And that is something that was a burden on me, or my responsibility was to have over the weeks before, hey guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to write these questions. These are the people that we think are going to come. And so make sure that as you write your question, you're directing it to the right person. Okay. At the time, the first year that we did it, there was a big deal going on in our tiny little town of Washington about parking. Crucial. So we had recently gone through a renovation, and we lost several parking spots that are on our main street, which then created parking problems in the parking lots. And then there's street parking versus parking lots, and you can park on the street, but you can't park in a parking lot after a certain time. Mm-hmm. And we all know as adults that that's to try to prevent anybody, but our teenagers feel like it was a burden on, that they were picking on them, saying that teenagers couldn't gather in the parking lots.
So this is civic learning at its greatest.
Oh, 100%. So, and since it had just happened, my students were all ready for it. So they wrote those questions, but they knew that those questions had to go to the city council or to the mayor, not to a county commissioner. And that's something that I really try to work hard on, is so that the students, when they complain about an issue or that they have an idea for something, that they're directing it to the right level of government. So that was on the city. And then for our county commissioners, we're having this big issue in Beaufort County about where does our trash go. So, they asked the county commissioners, what are you going to do about our recycling? And what are you going to do about our trash disposal? And then when it came to our representative, our state representative, that was the year that the budget was delayed. If that sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's kind of a current issue that we're facing, all right?
But and so they asked him questions about the budget, So, and I was so proud of my students that they had come up with these questions, and we had spent time in the classroom of leveling them and knowing who to direct them to. But I work really hard with my students to, regardless of whether you voted for that person or you would vote for that person, to still respect the office. And they did. They were so well-behaved and respective to the elected officials. This year when we went, some of my students just, and these were the most unlikely of students, and they had a question about some soccer fields that they had discovered behind a school that's in our little town. And they said, but there's no lights out there, and some of the goalposts aren't, kept up. And they went to the mayor, and the mayor said, that's a great question, and gave my students his personal cell phone number. And they worked on it, and they got goalposts and some lights put out there.
So they actually got something accomplished by...
Yes, and it didn't take legislation. It just took, some kids asking, hey, we'd like a place to go play soccer, and that's not one of the big parks. It's just a small little soccer field behind one of our inner city schools. And I know inner city sounds crazy for little bitty Washington, but we do have, a little area, and it was just this cute little pocket, and they had seen some soccer goals out there that were kind of unattended, and now the city's taking care of it.
Well, that's cool. So this is third year that you'll be doing it? Okay, so you started a couple of years ago. You worked out with the Board of Elections.
Board of Elections.
And then you got that where that person brought them in. So it wasn't how you had to do a lot of work to get them in.
No, it was very easy.
What about, did you do it at the Board of Elections?
Yes, and I think that was the big move in taking it away, instead of one person coming to my school, which I still love. I love showing off our school. But to give my students the opportunity to go somewhere. So often in high school, our kids don't take field trips anymore.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough to do it, but there's all kinds of reasons for that. But
it's hard on me. I have my bus license, so that's easy, but I've got to get somebody to cover my classes for the students that don't go. And so let's talk about that real quick. Not every student wants to go.
Okay.
And you don't want to take students and have them in a hostage-type situation in front of elected officials.
Sure.
So we just give them the choice. And a lot of students want to go because they want to leave the building. But some can't go if they have a community college class that maybe is going to interfere with that. Or, they leave early for whatever reasons, they have to go to a job. So I think given that flexibility of students, instead of saying, we are going on this field trip, to give that. But again, it means now you got to find somebody back at school to watch those students.
Now, do you give an assignment that maybe would correspond to what they might miss to do that?
Ooh, I probably should work on that, Travis.
We didn't talk about. As a.
But you're right. That's something I should do.
And it's probably something that do you have them when they come back to any type of given feedback or a idea of what they got to see and express and experience?
So, yes, and I do need to do something for those that stay in the classroom, but the ones that go on the trip do come back, and they explain, oh my gosh, I talked to this person, and they kind of rally and get other people, hey, we need to go to this city council meeting.
Right.
And I have seen that, and parents come back and say, my child watched the city council meeting last month, Why did my child do that? I said, well, we were talking about it, and they kind of got interested. So we look up the schedule. I try to make my students aware of when the meetings are happening. We go to school board meetings. It's just a thing I like to do. So I'll take some kids. We meet up at the school board meeting, and one of the school board members looks at me and says, "What are we studying this week, Ms. Tucker?"
Right.
So it has really worked that not only for me, but for my students, they've gotten to know our elected officials and they've become a part of it. I mean, they like doing that.
So do you find that they now are kind of almost excited about it and engaged with it? So you teach both semesters civic literacy, whereas I only teach one semester and then I switch over to the economics and personal finance. So do you try to do this both semesters, or is this just a one semester event?
So my birthday, we only go in the spring. But so typically what I've just gotten in the habit of doing is I'll have people come to us in the fall because I want to give those students something to do. And then we go on the trip in the spring. For those students who have flexible schedules and flexible teachers, they can kind of sneak in on that field trip in the spring.
Okay. So if I'm a new teacher coming in and a new civics teacher, really want my kids to have civic learning, civic literacy, which is the whole point of this, where would I start in this process?
For all the sometimes negative things about being in a rural community, I think because we are so close, and we work really well together. So, I mean, it's as easy as going to your Board of Elections. This summer, I had more meetings with the Board of Elections trying to plan something else. And she gave me the idea that it is a task that all members, all directors of the boards of election throughout the state are kind of tasked with promoting it. It's just in different levels, know. But there is the piece for them as well to go out in the community. And it may just be that no one's called them yet. I mean, I had not called ours until just a few years ago.
So they just need a contact person to maybe be the head of, maybe if you're in a specific county and you would be wanting to take that leadership role of, hey, here's the civic literacy day idea that we'd like to do, and here's a roundtable idea. Now, we're really talking about local stuff. And one of the things I wanted to bring up as well, and you and I have talked about it, is we are missing, in one sense, a lot of local material to, as civic literacy teachers, teach. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we've said is, hey, we need to try to get together and figure out how do we get these local civic literacy things to teachers that are teaching this topic. The problem is every county is different. 100 counties in North Carolina, and every single one of them has something different that they have to deal with, whether it's a municipality, whether it's a township, whatever. And even just starting that process is a little bit tough. So what would you tell somebody, again, maybe even an experienced teacher, maybe a new teacher coming into the civic literacy classroom, how to teach maybe a local government focus? I think
and it's just been my experience, start very small and have them come to your classroom first so that you can see how it works. And, you're the king of your classroom, so you can kind of control things a little bit better. And I would use your Board of Education. I think having your Board of Education in your classroom is so important. They can really see what's going on. Now, they're going to see the good and the bad, but I think it's very important to have your Board of Education in your school. And they just don't. They typically don't go into schools. I've been teaching 27 years, and it's only been in the last 7 that I've really engaged with my Board of Education.
Do you think it's where that they're not actually being invited?
I think they're not invited.
So, I mean, if you're listening and you're wondering how to get involved in the civic literacy local governing process, go talk to your local Board of Elections for the county, and then make sure that you go and find the names. Go ahead and put it on a list that you have. Go ahead and find their numbers, because the Board of Elections, they have all that information.
The Board of Elections, and I don't know if they're all or if it's, I just work under the most amazing director. When my students go, she prints out. She has color copies, which is just amazing, in a school system to see a color copy anyway.
Right.
But she has a list of everybody. I mean, starting with Tom Tillis, right on down to your soil conservation.
Really?
And she puts their name, she has their contact information, their phone number, their email, and she gives it to every one of my students.
Point for that one. Now, I'm going to say you're going to be jealous of this one. I went to my board of elections after we had talked, and she was able to get us a large map, 3 large maps of our entire county, and then another large map of our Kinston, the actual Kinston and how it was divvied out. And she was like, I got these printed off for you, but I got another copy for me for our county, because it was such a nice copy,
right,
that they were able to get one for them as well.
So like wall size?
That's
nice.
It was a good size.
Because what our director gives us is, and so Washington city limits versus Beaufort County, and particularly for the Board of Education, because that's just where we really try to focus. So she has all those maps zoned out for us. And I mean, it's a packet. And I show up and there's a packet and a pen for every student, just right there. She just takes care of it all.
That's awesome. So if you are a board of election person, and unfortunately they're hard to find right now, a lot of them are, a lot of counties are dealing with trying to find qualified Board of Elections staff members.
And there's legislation that was just proposed this summer that would make the director of the Board of Elections a partisan position.
Ooh, okay.
That the county commissioners, I believe, would then select the director of the Board of Elections. And that is not going over very well. I don't know. I haven't talked to our director since I had lunch with her before school started about what the process, how far along that bill was. But there was legislation that the directors would be chosen by county commissioners, which just makes it seem like that's a little conflict of interest.
And that is one of the things, though, that is so beautiful about that. And we've both went to a conference that talked about civil discourse. And all right, we may understand that or agree or disagree on that, but there are some valid sides of each of that discussion. But in the end, I think we have to talk about what role a Board of Elections person plays.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be nonpartisan, at least in my opinion, but they need to be able to not be involved in that process as well. And again, that is where civic education comes in so hard. I've been talking to my kids this week because I'm already back in school, Candi. So you're starting on Monday. I've already been back in school because I'm in early college. But at the end of the day, I talk to my kids about civic education is an everyday thing. It's everywhere around you is civics. And if you open your eyes a little bit to look and see how people interact with each other, how does your trash get taken? How much do you pay? Do you actually know you have to pay for certain of these things? What does the Board of Education do in response to different things going on? And so I think it is really important as a rule that we need to talk about civic education as a whole. Anything else you want to share as we close down? Is there anything else that you would like to share with teachers out there that are teaching civic literacy? Just kind of your final thoughts.
I know that some schools are teaching it in different age groups. I really, really, really strongly believe in teaching it to seniors.
Okay.
At our school, we made the decision 7 years ago to switch it. And so, and then, of course, with the EPF class, that makes it all different.
Sure.
We now do world history 9th grade. 10th grade is American history, and I know that's been juniors forever, but it works for us. EPF we do as 11th graders to try to, get the college planning piece. And then 12th grade for civics, just because you're registering to vote and or actually voting. And I think it has made a world of difference in how engaged my students are with the political process.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's a very important aspect, whether it's a junior or senior flipping. I teach both the civic literacy and the economics personal finance. I am a little biased. I think that's one of the two of the most important classes that they're ever going to have. And if it's taught well, problem is, and I'm gonna call on you, social studies teachers out there that are teaching it. You need to teach it with passion. If you're not going to teach it with passion, you need to teach something else because they need that. So that's just a little, I call it Dr. T rants, but that's okay. You can disagree with me later. Well, Candi, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We appreciate you participating in this edition of NCCSS Connections. This is a collective podcast for North Carolina social studies teachers. To our listeners, as your host, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who joined us. It's been an honor to explore the world of social studies education alongside such a passionate and dedicated community of educators. I do want to encourage you to keep the conversations going, connect with your fellow educators, continue to seek new opportunities for growth, and share your experiences with others. Remember that you are a vital part of shaping the future throughout the minds of your students. And of course, be sure to join us for new episodes of NCCSS Connections, where we continue an exciting journey together as we learn, grow, and collectively make a positive impact on future generations of North Carolina students. Until we meet again, remember that you are guiding minds, shaping futures, and empowering tomorrow's citizens. So do it well.